All right, yesterday we've seen the video of what happened on Wednesday, February the 4th, in Auburn Gresham neighborhood on the 7900 block of South May. Now, we don't know the name of the lady who was killed in this incident. We would have liked to be able to say her name, but it hasn't been released. But three or four gunmen, most likely black kids or maybe Hispanic kids, with masks on, with automatic rifles, pumped 40 bullets into the car of this lady while her boyfriend was in there and her toddler was in the back. Thank God the toddler didn't get killed. The lady died in the hospital. Now, the focus of our show today is not on the race of these guys or how bad this neighborhood is. It's just to show you that in Chicago, in neighborhoods like that, not in the neighborhoods where whites live or where liberal whether it's poor or upper middle class whites live, this would never be allowed to happen. Police would be there in seconds. But these guys pumped bullets into the car, ran away, keep shooting, got in their car, stopped their car, pumped more bullets, drove off. No policemen, anything. People taking cameras. So what we want to say is that this part of Chicago, the South Side and the West, is literally a war zone in which probably if you want to go out even to shop or anything, it's going to be scary. Now, it's 95% black. And when you look at the statistics of that neighborhood and blacks in general, 40 to 50% of young black males in Chicago are unemployed and also not finishing school. They're not in school, unemployed or not in school. That's 50% of people who are eligible, usually in their teens, to work or be in school, and a lot of them don't have schooling or work. So what the next thing they're going to do is get into drugs. Now, this is their only viable economy for these neighborhoods. And once again, I'm going to stress this: these guys have automatic weapons on a street in America and are allowed for a minute to a minute and a half to shoot, stay around, make sure you shoot again, and drive off, and they're not apprehended. So what I'm going to say is that just like Minnesota, where white liberals are complaining that there is a militarized zone and they're being persecuted by the government. We have a similar situation here on American streets in which there's a war going on because these kids that are shooting machine guns are not just thugs. They're part of a sophisticated billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry of drugs, which is well organized. So they're basically soldiers. The weapons that they get come from the cartels. They have lawyers who represent them who are well connected to the system to get them out on bail when they do things. So this is a war. The only difference that people will say is that in the case of the Minnesota, it's the government doing it to the people. But in the case of these boys shooting each other, it's them doing it to themselves. I'm going to argue that it is the government doing it to them because through government policies, through a history in which, if you go back as far as Reagan, the CIA brought in weapons and traded weapons for drugs, let drugs come in and planted them into inner cities to create these conditions. Second of all, through unfair and unequal housing estimation policies in the 1960s and the 70s, which go until now of getting bank loans and evaluating your houses, the value of these neighborhoods has dropped. There's no industry in them, so that these young men are not doing this just because they're violent. They're doing it because there's no economy, there's no money coming in, and also they're violent, and they're violent because money hasn't been coming into their neighborhoods. No infrastructure. While the U.S. spends billions paying basically for almost every aspect of Israel's economy and Ukraine during the war. They pay for education, pay for healthcare, pay for going to the dentist, everything, but pump no money into black cities, black neighborhoods in America to build infrastructure in schools. They don't do it. And at the same time, in the suburbs in America where people are working service jobs, which feed the finance big cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, the suburbs are the fringes of that economic system, and the U.S. government gives grants to these suburbs to provide jobs, infrastructures, malls, and everything to the point where it almost doesn't even work for profit. So that's a perfect example of welfare for people who live in the suburbs. And we all know that in the U.S., the only people who live in the suburbs are whites or upper middle class blacks. So when you look at all of that, you can't just say that, oh, these boys are to blame for the war that's going on amongst themselves, the black on black war. They're actually fighting a war that's been enabled to become militarized by the U.S. government and by the U.S. society because nobody cares. The liberals in Minnesota don't care that this is happening. So what you have in the U.S. is you have racial inequality among social and economic lines, which forces these kids to become soldiers on the streets. And there's a war going on, but I don't hear the government saying there's a war going on in Chicago. This is unacceptable. Chicago is part of America. Kids are coming out of here with machine guns killing each other. They're not even trying to stop the crime. This needs a federal intervention when you send soldiers in. But just like with the ICE thing, sending soldiers in is not going to really solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is what I would call a new Marshall Bill, just like Roosevelt did when he had a New Deal. There needs to be money pumped into these black neighborhoods for schools, to build industries, to build manufacturing, to build kids who can code and do AI. If you do that within 20 years, this crime will stop. And also, the government needs to, even if it's not enabling crime, the government needs to come down hard on the cartel, but I doubt they will because I have a feeling the government is in bed with the cartel. So long as the cartel has a grip on America and has good lawyers and everything, Trump just let out the guy from Honduras or Ecuador. He let him out of jail, a drug dealer who was bringing drugs into this country. So long as these guys are unable to bring drugs in, there's always going to be kids that they can find to sell the drugs for them. So it's a two-tiered problem. The government needs to protect our borders and truly fight the drug trade rather than enable it. And they also need to pump tons of money into black neighborhoods. A lot of people say, well, this is a free market capitalist system. These black kids or black people, the black community needs to build its own infrastructure. The US doesn't work like that way. The suburbs you see in America, cities like New York, the liberal cities, they're heavily, heavily subsidized by loans and bonds by the US. So if you can do it for them, why not do it for black people? So that we don't have to sit down in our neighborhoods, which are also American neighborhoods, in which half of the population of Chicago is a war zone where kids, they're not even kids, these are soldiers with guns, can shoot, kill people, shoot a car with a black girl, little black girl in it, and a 26-year-old black woman and a 27-year-old man, and shoot them and nothing happens. If this had been in a white suburb in Chicago and it had been white people in that car, these guys would be dead or in jail right now. What are your thoughts, Kunle?
Yes, I mean, starting from the fact that the white population in America were brought out of poverty in the 1924 Dawes Plan and Young Plan, which are the kind of plans that you need to do in these areas to bring them out. What makes it what makes it a real terrifying issue is that these gangs that are being trained, they're being trained by soldiers that fought in wars in America, came back. They had no work and they had nothing else to do. And the cartel snapped them up and get them to train their thugs and whoever to a level that is like military grade skill. Because if you look at the way they approached that car to kill those people, you know, when I saw the video and I didn't see the context, I thought that was ICE or federal agents. I didn't realize they were criminals because the way that they approached the car was with the skill of like a killing team. That, you know, it was professional. It looked professional. It didn't look like, you know, gangbangers jumping up and down. And that's militarization of crime to that level is quite terrifying because there's no coming back from that. I mean, this is a problem that is even. I mean, this is a problem that even if it happened in Nigeria, it would be terrifying because of the level of skill. I mean, it's almost there's almost a kind of strange similarity between what's happening there in terms of this kind of violence and the potential of what happens in the north. Both places have several things in common, but the main denominating factor that they have in common is abject poverty and hopelessness.
And when you say no, so you're talking about the military style raids that are in Nigeria and other parts of Nigeria.
You create an environment of poverty and hopelessness. Yeah, so it creates a ripe environment for crime. And when you have that, you create, but the hopelessness, it's like a vicious circle. And if it gets out of control at some point, you may not even be able to step in and clean it up again because you're now creating a deviant culture. And there's no coming back from a deviant culture when you know, I don't see how this government, this far right government, can only make it worse. It's like pouring kerosene on a fire. These neighborhoods really need social investment. They don't need short-term capitalist policing. Batman go in, kill bad guys. That's just not going to work unless you plan to have a genocide in America. It's just not going to work. You have to learn to make them people that you can live amongst. And there's no reason why. I mean, you go to Western Europe, you see large swathes of Western Europe, you don't see such problems, except where you have the minorities and the disenfranchised and the poor who are off the who. It's only when you see poor people and disadvantaged people that you see those levels of crime and mess, and
Yeah,
um, and America should be wise to that. But because they've linked that so closely to their racial doctrine, they just believe that if you're brown, you're going to be poor, you're going to be a criminal, and therefore it reinforces a barrier that can't be broken. And when you can't break that barrier, you simply can't proceed to take these people out of poverty. China
yeah,
has shown that it can be done. China has shown that you can that we take people out of poverty. They're just better. And it's not about because they're black or white or yellow. It's because your government has a plan to provide food, housing, shelter, education, and work. And when you have all these things in a normal for people, the ordinary person, and basic access to basic justice. Once you have all those things for your people, you're not going to have these problems.
yeah. And
But I
there's
think
another
these
problem
problems
too.
are generated in Western countries in order to,
Not just Western countries, because in England
yes,
you have
because
maybe
it's a
300.
naturally parasitic economy.
No, but the U.S. is worse than Europe, because in Europe, in England, you have 300 murders a year. Chicago, you have anywhere up to 700 to 1,000 in just one city. What it is that America's economy is based on violence. America's culture is violence. It's a military economy. It's an empire which creates high-grade weapons to kill people in other parts of the country and creates them within America to say people protect your property. So America is a country in which we cheer when we bomb other countries, when we beat Iran, when we bully Venezuela, when we destroy Iraq. So Americans are violent. So what you see is that in poverty, where people are already violent, it's even worse. In England, people don't carry around thugs don't really carry around guns; they carry knives. So less people get killed. So this is a bigger problem in America. But as Europe becomes more and more like America and copies American culture, we're seeing that their violence goes up too. And what you're seeing with these kids with military grade weapons that are becoming deviant is the same thing you see with the ICE agents. They're rednecks who are basically poor people too, who take a $50,000 bonus to go out on the street and just basically play God with machine guns. So you see in the parallel, black neighborhoods, young boys who are thugs become deviant, ICE agents and National Guard who have machine guns who are bullies. It's the same dynamic, and this is a problem that we see in the U.S. And the way to stop this is to stop printing money to invest in wars and weaponry and sustaining the nation of Israel and the nation of Ukraine, and to pump money, like you said, socially invest in America. That means every part of America, every goddamn neighborhood. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like England, when it comes to the deaths, there's about 400 deaths for being shooting. Everything is 400. I think America is in the area of 10,000. Um,
Yeah,
so aside from the poverty issue, I know that if England took on these same laws, you'd see similar casualties
yeah,
reflected in England. I can't
yeah,
see any other reason because the people of England that suffer at the hands of poverty and all of that, they're just as vulnerable and they're just as they're no different. So it's
yeah.
purely the only difference between the poor in England in London and the poor in New York, where I heard a shocking statistic that there used to be as many as 3,000 murders in New York every year, and it's down to 300. I heard that
Yeah,
that was a statistic over the last 10, 20 years. I was horrified. 3,000 a year. That
yeah,
I mean, these are numbers that are astronomical for any even at third world countries at peacetime don't have those
yeah.
kind of
Even
figures.
during war,
They only
even
reach
during
those kind of
war.
figures in civil wars or if you have
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Even during war,
so,
it's comparable. I mean, it's horrific.
so meanwhile, so all I'll say is that rather than focus on Iran and how bad things are there, time to focus on how bad things are in America. All right, Quinley, take us out. We're done, man. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at the growing violence, cultural violence in America, and the the solutions that we need to put in place, but are so far away from even being conceived at this point. And as we fear that things may go from bad to worse, and we watch on and hope for the best. From myself and Mustafa, it's goodbye, farewell, adieu. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, man. I'll probably see you on Monday because not much is going on tomorrow. Maybe we could talk about soccer tomorrow. Maybe. Okay.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Nice one. All right.